Have you ever felt like you're reacting to certain foods, but you know it's not a classic allergy? Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're going to demystify histamine intolerance, a condition that might just be the hidden reason behind a whole bunch of really confusing chronic symptoms. Think about it. Do you ever get a nagging headache after some aged cheese and red wine? Or maybe you feel super bloated after eating leftovers? What about that random itchy skin that seems to pop up out of nowhere? On the surface, they feel totally unrelated, right? But what if I told you they're not? These mysterious symptoms, they might actually be connected. In this explainer, we're going to dig into one potential cause that could link them all together, and it all revolves around a single, powerful chemical that your body is making every single day. And when I say connected, I mean the symptoms are incredibly widespread. We're talking about a condition that can hit almost every system in your body. Yeah, from digestive issues like bloating and pain, which are super common, all the way to headaches, skin problems like hives, a stuffy nose, and even your heart rate getting a little wonky. And that complexity is really the key here. It's almost never just one thing. In fact, one study found that almost 97% of patients with histamine intolerance have more than 3 different symptoms. So it's no wonder this whole thing is so confusing and often so hard to diagnose. So what is this chemical at the center of the mystery? Well, let's talk about histamine. It's a molecule that is absolutely essential for our health, but in some cases, it can also be the source of all our problems. You know, we usually think of histamine as the bad guy, right? The thing you take an antihistamine for. But in reality, it's a vital chemical messenger. It helps your immune system fight off pathogens, it tells your stomach to release acid for digestion, and it even acts as a neurotransmitter in your brain. It is a very important player. And this is the most important thing to understand. Histamine intolerance is not an allergy or a sensitivity to histamine. I mean, how could you be allergic to something your own body makes? No, instead, it's a sign that you've just got too much of it. Your system is overloaded. To make this super clear, we're going to use a really simple analogy that perfectly explains what's going on. Let's call it your histamine bucket. But before we get to the bucket, we have to meet the hero of this story, an enzyme called diamine oxidase, or just DAO for short. This little enzyme is the star of the show. Its main job is to break down and get rid of the histamine that comes into your body from food. Okay, so here's how the bucket works. Imagine that histamine from food and from your body's own cells is constantly pouring into this bucket. Now, your DAO enzyme, that's the drain at the bottom. As long as that drain is working efficiently, histamine flows out, the level in the bucket stays nice and low, and you feel perfectly fine. So, in a healthy system, that drain is wide open, and histamine is cleared out just as fast as it comes in. Simple. But with histamine intolerance, that drain is basically clogged or just way too slow. So histamine pours in faster than it can drain out, the bucket overflows, and that overflow is what causes all those symptoms we talked about. Okay, so the obvious question is, what's clogging the drain? Why isn't someone's DAO enzyme doing its job properly? Well, it turns out there are a few pretty big reasons. We can basically split the causes into 2 main camps. First, it can be genetic. Yep, some people just have gene variations that mean they naturally produce less of the DAO enzyme. But honestly, it's much more common for it to be a secondary issue, something acquired. Things like gut disorders, celiac disease, or IBD can damage the gut lining where most of your DAO is actually made. Plus, certain medications and even the bacteria living in your gut play a massive role. And this is a really practical one to know. A surprising number of very common medications can actually block your DAO enzyme, basically putting a plug in that drain. We're talking about some antidepressants, anti-nausea drugs, even common mucus thinners and components of antibiotics. But maybe the most fascinating piece of this whole puzzle is the powerful connection to our gut. As this quote from a 2022 study points out, researchers are seeing a very clear link between an imbalance in our gut bacteria, what's known as dysbiosis, and histamine intolerance. So what does that imbalance look like? Well, it's pretty straightforward. In patients who have histamine intolerance, scientists found that they had fewer of the good guys, the beneficial bacteria that we want. And at the exact same time, they had a lot more of a different type of bacteria, ones that actually produce histamine themselves, pouring even more into the bucket. And to get a little more specific for a second, the research showed that levels of beneficial bacteria like Faecalibacterium, which is a major marker of a healthy gut, were way down. Meanwhile, certain histamine-producing bacteria like Staphylococcus and Proteus are way up. So your own gut can become a factory for histamine. All right, so with all of this information, how in the world do you figure out if this is actually what's going on with you? And more importantly, what can you do about it? Let's get into the practical side of things, diagnosis and management. Well, diagnosing this is really a process of elimination. First, a doctor has to make sure it isn't a true food allergy. After that, the gold standard is an elimination diet. For about 2 to 4 weeks, you cut out all the high histamine foods. Then you slowly reintroduce them, one by one, and you watch to see which ones cause a reaction. A blood test to measure your DAO enzyme levels can also be a really helpful clue. The absolute cornerstone of managing this is diet. The general idea is you want to limit foods that are aged, fermented, or preserved. So think sauerkraut, salami, red wine. Even leftovers can be tricky since histamine levels naturally increase as food sits. The focus then shifts to fresh foods, freshly cooked meat and fish, most fresh veggies, and non-citrus fruits. But it's not just diet. There are other strategies. Some people get a lot of help from taking a DAO enzyme supplement right before a meal. It's also really important to get enough vitamin C and copper, which are like little helpers for your body's own DAO enzyme. But the most important thing of all, you gotta address the root cause, which so often means focusing on improving your gut health. And that's the real takeaway here. The long-term goal isn't just to be on a super restrictive diet for the rest of your life. It's about restoring your body's natural balance. It's a two-pronged attack. Lower the total amount of histamine pouring into your bucket while you work on unclogging the drain. Which brings us to our final thought. With all this powerful new research showing the link between gut health and histamine overload, maybe the future of managing this condition isn't just about what you avoid eating. Maybe it's about what you cultivate in your gut. Could rebalancing your microbiome be the real key to finally emptying that histamine bucket for good? That's a pretty compelling question that science is just now starting to answer.